The cathedral door gave beneath her weight with a groan that sounded like a confession, and Natalie Hartwell stumbled through in a cloud of white silk and desperation, her borrowed veil tangling in her fingers as she tore it free. The main sanctuary stretched before her, cavernous and dim despite the afternoon light filtering through stained glass, and she pressed herself against the cool stone wall, gasping for air that tasted of old incense and older secrets. Behind her, somewhere in the distance, she could hear voices calling her name, the wedding coordinator's shrill panic cutting through the general chaos, and her mother's voice rising above it all in a crescendo of social mortification. Natalie squeezed her eyes shut and felt the tears finally come, hot and furious and too late to stop anything. She had made it to the altar, had stood there with Marcus Whitfield's hand clammy in hers while the priest droned through preliminaries, had felt the weight of 300 expectant faces pressing against her back like a physical thing. And then the priest had asked if anyone present knew of any lawful impediment, and she had opened her mouth and said, "I do." The memory made her laugh now, a sharp hysterical sound that echoed up into the vaulted ceiling. The look on Marcus's face, the collective gasp, her father's expression shifting from pride to fury in the space of a heartbeat. She pushed away from the wall and moved deeper into the cathedral, away from the main doors, toward the shadowed transept, where a smaller side chapel opened like a secret. The voices outside were growing closer. Someone had seen which way she ran. Of course they had. You couldn't exactly hide in a wedding dress that cost more than a car, not when half of Philadelphia society was hunting you down to salvage their precious event. The side chapel was older than the main sanctuary, medieval stone imported block by some industrialist with more money than sense, and it smelled different here, colder, like earth and silence. A few candles guttered on the altar, casting uncertain light across the carved face of some St. Natalie didn't recognize. She gathered her skirts and hurried inside, looking for anywhere to hide, any shadow deep enough to swallow her. That was when she saw him. He was kneeling in the darkness before the altar, so still she had taken him for a statue at first, and her breath caught in her throat as her eyes adjusted, and she realized he was real. He was a man, he was impossibly beautiful, and he was staring at her with eyes that caught the candlelight like a cat's. For a moment, neither of them moved. He rose in a single fluid motion, no sound, no effort, just a shift from kneeling to standing that defied physics, and Natalie took a step backward before she could stop herself. He was tall, she registered dimly, and dressed in black that made him look like a piece of the darkness itself. And his skin was so pale it seemed to glow in the candlelight, bone white, and his hair fell around his shoulders in a cascade of silver white that should have made him look old but instead made him look timeless. "Forgive the intrusion," she managed, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I didn't think anyone would be here." He said nothing, only watched her with that unnerving stillness, and Natalie became aware of how she must look, wild-eyed and gasping in her wedding gown, mascara probably streaked down her face. "I'm hiding," she added, because apparently shock had destroyed whatever filter normally existed between her brain and her mouth. "From my wedding. My wedding I just ran away from. So if you could just pretend you didn't see me, I would really appreciate it." Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around the edges. "I'm also hiding," he said, and his voice was low and accented in a way she couldn't place, old-fashioned in its precision. "Though not from a wedding. Not yet." "Not yet?" "Tomorrow night," he said. "I am to wed someone I have never met, to seal a peace I do not believe in. Tonight I am permitted this vigil, this last night of my own." Natalie felt something unlock in her chest, some tight knot of isolation loosening. So we're both doomed then. It would appear so. From outside came the sound of voices in the main sanctuary calling her name, and Natalie flinched. The man moved, not toward her but sideways, blocking her from view of the chapel entrance with his own body, and gestured toward a door she hadn't noticed, set low in the wall and half hidden behind a carved screen. "The crypt stairs," he said quietly. "No one will look for you below. Why are you helping me?" He met her eyes, and she saw something ancient move in his gaze, something that made her breath catch for an entirely different reason. Perhaps because I wish someone had offered me the same door. She didn't think. She just moved, gathering her ridiculous skirts and hurrying to the door. It opened silently and revealed stone steps spiraling down into darkness. She hesitated on the threshold and looked back at him. "Thank you." "Go," he said. "I will send them another direction." She went. The crypt was pitch black and smelled of old stone and older death, and Natalie had to feel her way down the stairs with one hand on the wall, her other hand lifting her skirt so she wouldn't trip. The darkness was total, disorienting, and by the time she reached the bottom, she was breathing hard again, panic fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. She heard the door at the top of the stairs open and close, heard footsteps descending, and then a soft light bloomed in the darkness. The man from the chapel appeared carrying a candle, his white skin and hair seeming to gather and amplify the small flame until he glowed like a ghost. "They are gone," he said. "But they will search the building. You should stay here until dark." "Until dark," Natalie repeated numbly and sank down onto a stone sarcophagus that probably held someone important once. "What time is it now?" "Nearly 4 in the afternoon. So I have 3 hours to sit in a crypt in my wedding dress and contemplate my life choices." He set the candle down on the tomb beside her and settled onto the edge of another sarcophagus across from her with the same inhuman grace, and Natalie found herself staring at him properly for the first time. He was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache, all sharp, elegant lines and that impossible coloring, and there was something in the way he held himself that spoke of absolute certainty, of power so complete it didn't need to announce itself. "May I know your name?" he asked. "Natalie," she said. "Natalie Hartwell." "And you are?" "Quintus Falkenrath." "That's very dramatic." His mouth quirked. "My parents had a sense of occasion." "Falkenrath," Natalie said slowly, tasting the name. "That's German? Austrian?" "Old Prussian," he said. "My family is from the mountains originally. We have been in America only 50 years. And they're marrying you off to broker peace? What is this, the 16th century?" "In some ways, yes," Quintus said, and there was something in his tone that made Natalie's skin prickle. "My people are old-fashioned. We believe in duty, in honor, in the bonds that hold our world together." "Well, my people believe in mergers and acquisitions and social climbing," Natalie said bitterly. "My father made a deal with Marcus Whitfield's father 10 years ago, a business arrangement, and I was the signing bonus." "You do not love him?" It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I don't even like him. He's pompous and boring, and he collects guns, which would be fine, except he talks about them constantly, and he called me sweetheart in that condescending way that makes you feel about 6 inches tall." She laughed, sharp and painful. "God, I stood at that altar and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. That took courage. Or stupidity. I just humiliated my entire family in front of everyone they know. My father is probably having a stroke. My mother will never speak to me again. And Marcus will make sure everyone knows I'm unstable, unreliable, a flake." The tears were threatening again, and she forced them back. "So yeah, courage." Quintus was quiet for a moment, watching her with those strange light eyes. "What will you do after dark?" "I don't know," Natalie admitted. "I don't have anywhere to go. All my things are at Marcus's penthouse, which I obviously can't go back to. My parents will lock me in my room if I show my face. My friends are all my mother's friends' daughters, so that's out. I have some money, but not much. I've been living off Marcus's accounts for the past 6 months while we planned the wedding." She heard how pathetic that sounded and felt her face heat. "I know how that looks." "It looks like someone who was trapped," Quintus said quietly. "Do not apologize for surviving your cage." Something in his voice made her look at him sharply. "You sound like you know the feeling." "I have lived 800 years, he said, and the candle flame reflected in his eyes like a promise. "I know every cage there is." The words didn't register at first. Natalie stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but his expression didn't change. 800 years. The words hung in the air between them like a held breath. "What are you?" she whispered. "I think you know." She did. She had known from the moment she saw him in the darkness, that inhuman stillness, that predatory grace. She had known, and she had chosen not to think about it, because thinking about it meant accepting that the world was bigger and stranger than she had believed, meant accepting that monsters were real. "Vampire," she said, and the word tasted like copper and old wine. Yes. She should have run, should have screamed, should have done anything except sit there on a tomb in her ruined wedding dress and feel a wild laugh bubbling up in her chest. "Of course," she said. "Of course, the night I run away from my wedding, I hide in a crypt with a vampire. Why wouldn't that happen?" "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," Natalie corrected. "I just don't have the energy to express it properly." "Are you going to kill me?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I came here to hide from my own fate," Quintus said. "Not to deal death, and because you ran from a cage, and I will not build you a new one." Natalie studied him in the candlelight, this impossible creature with his old world manners and his terrible loneliness, and felt something shift in her understanding of the night. "Your marriage," she said slowly. "It's a vampire thing, a political thing. My court has been at war with the Dragomir family for 3 centuries, Quintus said. "It began over an insult I can no longer remember, and it has consumed countless lives. 2 years ago, the elders proposed a solution. I would marry Elisabetta Dragomir, unite our bloodlines, end the feud. I agreed. What else could I do? I am king. The weight of my people's survival rests on me. But you don't want to." "I do not know what I want," he said, and for the first time she heard something like weariness in his voice. "I have been a king for so long, I no longer remember being anything else. Wanting is a luxury I set aside centuries ago." "That sounds incredibly depressing." "It is duty." "Duty is just a prettier word for prison," Natalie said. "Trust me, I've been dutiful my whole life. Perfect daughter, perfect student, perfect fiancé. And where did it get me? Running away in a wedding dress, hiding in a crypt, talking to a vampire who's about to throw his life away for peace." Quintus leaned forward slightly, his attention sharp now, focused on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You think I should refuse?" "I think you should have a choice," Natalie said. "I think everyone should have a choice, but what do I know? I'm a spoiled rich girl who just threw the world's most expensive tantrum." "You're brave," Quintus said quietly. "Braver than I have been in a very long time." They sat in silence for a moment, the candle flame dancing between them, and Natalie felt the strangeness of the night settle over her like a blanket. Here in the dark, in this pocket of stillness beneath the city, nothing else seemed real. Not the wedding, not her family, not the disaster waiting for her in the world above. Just this conversation, this strange, pale man who looked at her like she had said something worth hearing. "Tell me about your world," she said finally. "The vampire world. I want to know." So he told her. He spoke of courts hidden beneath old cities, vast halls carved from living stone where vampires gathered to settle disputes and forge alliances. He spoke of the blood laws that governed their society, ancient and absolute, and the councils that enforced them. He spoke of territories and bloodlines and feuds that stretched back centuries, and of the careful balance that kept their world hidden from humanity's eyes. Natalie listened, fascinated despite herself, asking questions that made him pause and consider, and somewhere in the telling the candle burned low, and Quintus produced another from somewhere in the shadows, and the hours passed like minutes. "Your marriage," she said eventually, "tomorrow night. What happens?" "There will be a ceremony," Quintus said. "Both courts will gather in neutral ground beneath the city. Elisabetta and I will exchange vows witnessed by the elders, and then we will be bound for as long as we both endure." "Have you met her?" "Once. 10 years ago, before the betrothal was arranged. She was young then, newly turned, and she looked at me with such hate I felt it like a physical blow." "She hates you?" "Her brother died in the feud," Quintus said quietly, "by my hand, in battle. She has not forgotten." "Jesus," Natalie breathed. "And they expect you to marry her? To build a life with someone who hates you?" "The marriage is not about love," Quintus said. "It is about survival, about ending the killing before there is no one left to save." "But you'll be miserable." "Yes." The simple honesty of it hurt something in Natalie's chest. She stood abruptly, her skirts rustling in the silence, and paced to the edge of the candlelight. "This is insane. Both of us just accepting these ridiculous fates because other people decided them for us. There has to be another way. If there is, I have not found it in 2 years of searching. Then we're not looking hard enough, Natalie said fiercely. She turned back to him, her mind spinning. What if you ended the feud another way? What if you didn't need the marriage? The Dragomir will not negotiate. Their honor demands blood for blood, and they have lost more than we have. The marriage is the only thing they will accept. What if it wasn't? What if you could offer them something else, something better? Such as? Natalie opened her mouth and closed it again. She had no idea. She was a 24-year-old human woman with a degree in art history and no practical skills whatsoever. What could she possibly offer to a centuries-old blood feud? But the kernel of the idea was there, bright and defiant in her mind. There had to be another way. There had to be. I don't know yet, she admitted. But I'll think about it. We'll think about it. We. Well, I'm not going anywhere, Natalie said. I can't. I have nowhere to go, remember? So I might as well stay here and help you brainstorm ways out of your doom wedding while I avoid my own doom life. Quintus stared at her for a long moment, and then something extraordinary happened. He smiled. A real smile, not the polite, almost expression from before, and it transformed his face completely, made him look younger, made him look alive. Very well, he said. We will conspire together, you and I. 2 fugitives from fate. 2 fugitives from fate, Natalie repeated, and felt an answering smile tug at her lips. I like that. The hours crept toward midnight, and Natalie's stomach started to growl, a mortifying sound in the silence of the crypt. Quintus raised an eyebrow. When did you last eat? Breakfast, Natalie admitted. I was too nervous for lunch, and then there was supposed to be a reception dinner, but, well, that didn't happen. You should eat. I don't have any food. The cathedral has a rectory, Quintus said. The priests will be asleep by now. I can retrieve something from their kitchen. You're going to rob a church kitchen for me? I'm going to borrow food, Quintus corrected. I will leave money. Wait here. He was gone before she could protest, moving up the stairs with that unnatural silence, and Natalie was left alone in the candlelit crypt with her thoughts. The reality of her situation was starting to creep in around the edges of her shock. She had nowhere to go. No money, no plan, no future beyond the next few hours. Her phone was in her clutch, which was somewhere in the cathedral, probably found by now, probably being held by her mother, who was tracking her location and planning her recapture. She had really done it. Burned every bridge, torched every relationship, destroyed the life her parents had built for her. And for what? Freedom? The chance to choose? It felt impossibly naive now, sitting here in a wedding dress worth $30,000, everything she owned tied up in a life she had just rejected. Quintus returned with bread and cheese and apples, real food that he arranged on a cloth on the tomb beside her with a courtliness that made her throat tight. Eat, he said gently. We will solve your problems after you have eaten. Natalie ate, and the food helped, grounded her, gave her something to focus on besides her spiraling thoughts. Quintus watched her with patient attention, and when she was finished, he handed her a bottle of water that was probably also stolen from the church. Thank you, she said quietly. It is nothing. It's not nothing. You didn't have to help me. You could have ignored me or turned me over to my family or just left, but you helped me. Why? Quintus was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. When you ran into that chapel, he said finally, you looked like I felt, lost and desperate and refusing to give in, and I thought if I could offer you sanctuary, even for a few hours, perhaps it would prove that such things still exist, that there is still such a thing as grace in this world. Grace, Natalie repeated softly. Or perhaps I'm simply lonely, Quintus said with a self-deprecating quirk of his mouth, and you are the first person in a very long time to speak to me as though I were simply a man and not a king. You are simply a man, Natalie said, a man who happens to be a vampire and happens to be royalty and happens to be 800 years old, but still, just a man making choices. Choices, he echoed and looked away. Yes. They talked through the night, there in the darkness beneath the cathedral, and Natalie learned things she had never imagined. She learned that Quintus had been born in the year 1226 in what was now Germany, the son of a minor noble who had died in debt. She learned that he had been turned at 28 by a vampire lord who needed soldiers for a war, and that he had spent his first century as a warrior, fighting in conflicts he barely understood. She learned that he had become king almost by accident, inheriting the title when the previous monarch was destroyed in a power struggle, and that he had held the position for 500 years through a combination of strength, strategy, and sheer stubborn refusal to yield. She learned that he was tired. "I have seen empires rise and fall," he told her. "I have walked through the Black Death and the Napoleonic Wars and both world wars, and I have watched humanity grow from scattered villages to this vast, sprawling network of cities and screens. And sometimes I wonder what the point is, what I am still doing here, leading people who do not need me, fighting battles that change nothing. But you keep going." "I keep going," he agreed, "because what else is there?" "There's choice," Natalie said. "There's deciding what you want instead of just accepting what you're given." "And what do you want, Natalie Hartwell, now that you have chosen to run?" It was the question she had been avoiding all night, and she made herself face it now. "I want a life that's mine," she said slowly. "I want to make decisions and make mistakes and not have every move I make be about what it means for my family's reputation or my father's business or what society will think. I want to matter for who I am, not what I represent." "That is a good want," Quintus said quietly. "Hold on to it. What about you? What do you want?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, something vulnerable and quickly hidden. "I want what I cannot have. Try me." "I want to walk in daylight again," he said softly. "I want to remember what the sun feels like on my skin. I want to sleep and dream. I want time to mean something again, hours and days instead of this endless procession of years. I want to feel young." "You feel old?" "I am old, Natalie. So old that sometimes I forget what it means to be alive." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely weary. "And then someone like you runs into my sanctuary in a wedding dress, burning with life and fury, and I remember. For a moment, I remember." Natalie felt her breath catch. The candle had burned low again, the light soft and gold and limning his features in shadow, and she found herself thinking that 800 years was a long time to be lonely. "I'm glad I ran into your sanctuary," she said quietly, "even if we're both disasters." "Perhaps especially because we are both disasters," Quintus said, and smiled at her again. "That surprising transformation. We understand each other." The candles burned to stubs, and Quintus produced more, and dawn came invisibly in the world above while they remained below, talking like old friends, like conspirators, like two people who had found in each other a mirror they hadn't known they needed. Eventually, Natalie's exhaustion caught up with her, and she dozed on the stone tomb, her head pillowed on her arms, and when she woke, the crypt was darker, and Quintus was sitting exactly where she had left him, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "How long was I asleep?" 3 hours. It's afternoon now. You should rest more." "I don't want to rest," Natalie said, sitting up and pushing her hair out of her face. "I want to solve your problem." "My problem?" "The feud, the marriage. There has to be another way to end it." "Natalie?" "No, listen. You said the Dragomir want blood for blood, right? They want justice for what they've lost. But what if you could give them something better than justice? What if you could give them restoration?" Quintus frowned. "What do you mean?" "You said the feud has cost both sides, lives, resources, territory. What if instead of a marriage that neither of you want, you proposed a genuine peace, a redistribution of territory, reparations for losses, a shared governance structure that gives them real power, not just symbolic unity?" "They will not negotiate. They haven't wanted to negotiate because the only thing on the table was vague promises of maybe someday ending the killing. But if you came to them with a real offer, something concrete and immediate, something that gives them more than your miserable marriage ever could, maybe they would listen." Quintus was staring at her now, his attention sharp and focused. "Go on. You're the king, right? You have power. Use it. Offer them half of your disputed territories outright. Offer them seats on your council, real political power. Offer them access to your resources, your trade networks, whatever vampires trade. Make them a deal so good that refusing it would be stupid. and make it contingent on them agreeing to a real peace treaty, no marriage required. The elders will never agree. They have already arranged the marriage. So unarrange it. You're the king. Tell them you've found a better way. It is not that simple. Why not? Natalie challenged. Is there some vampire law that says you have to marry Elisabetta? Some binding contract? There is tradition, expectation. So break it. You've been king for 500 years. You must have broken tradition before. Quintus stood and paced to the edge of the candlelight, his movements restless now, agitated. You make it sound simple. It is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. You don't want to marry Elisabetta. She doesn't want to marry you. The only people who want this marriage are people who don't have to live it, so find another way and take it. And if the Dragomir refuse? If they demand the marriage regardless? Then you tell them no, Natalie said. You tell them you're offering them a genuine path to peace and prosperity, and if they choose hatred over that, then the blood that follows is on their hands, not yours. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. You are asking me to risk my entire court on a negotiation. I'm asking you to try, Natalie said, to at least try before you chain yourself to someone who hates you for the rest of your immortal life. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire, and Natalie held her breath. She had overstepped. She barely knew this man, this vampire king with his ancient burdens and his impossible choices, and here she was telling him how to run his court, his life, his war. But then Quintus laughed, a startled, genuine sound that echoed off the stone walls. You are extraordinary, he said. Do you know that? You're 24 years old, and you just ran away from your own wedding, and you were sitting in a crypt in a dress that costs more than most people earn in a year, and you were trying to solve a 300-year-old vampire blood feud with political theory. Is it working? Yes, he said, and the wonder in his voice made her chest tighten. Yes, I think it might be. He came back to sit across from her, leaning forward with his hands clasped between his knees. I will need to move quickly. The wedding is tonight. I will need to call a council meeting, present the proposal to my elders, and send an envoy to the Dragomir before sunset. Can you do all that in a few hours? I am very old and very efficient, Quintus said dryly. Yes, I can do it. But Natalie, if this fails, if the Dragomir refuse or my own court rebels, it could mean war. Real war. And if you marry Elisabetta, it means a lifetime of misery, Natalie said, and probably war eventually anyway when one of you snaps. At least this way you're fighting for something real. Fighting for choice. Fighting for choice, she agreed. Quintus reached out and took her hand, and his skin was cool against hers, smooth and strong. Thank you, he said quietly, for seeing a path I could not see, for reminding me that I am more than my duty. Natalie felt her throat tighten. Thank you for giving me somewhere to hide, for treating me like a person instead of a problem. You are the least problem-like person I have ever met. I'm literally a runaway bride hiding in a crypt. Yes, Quintus said, and his thumb stroked across her knuckles in a gesture that sent electricity racing up her arm. And you are magnificent. The moment hung between them, charged with something Natalie didn't have words for, and then Quintus released her hand and stood. I must go. I must begin making arrangements. But you should stay here where it is safe. No one comes to the crypts. I will return before sunset and tell you what has happened. What if your people say no? Then I will have a choice to make, Quintus said. But that is my burden, not yours. Rest, Natalie. You are safe here. He was gone before she could answer, moving up the stairs in that eerie silence, and Natalie was left alone in the darkness with her racing thoughts and her pounding heart. She had just told a vampire king to break his political engagement and risk a war. She had just held hands with an 800-year-old immortal and felt something spark between them like lightning. She was in so much trouble. The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Natalie tried to sleep but couldn't, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. What if the Dragomir said no? What if Quintus's court refused to back him? What if she had just made everything worse? And underneath that, quieter but more insistent, another question. What if this worked? What if Quintus was freed from his unwanted marriage? What then? She barely knew him. One night of conversation in a crypt did not a relationship make. He was a vampire king, immortal and powerful, and so far outside her world that the distance was almost funny. She was a human woman with no job, no home, no prospects, who had just destroyed her entire life on impulse. Nothing about this made sense. But when she closed her eyes, she could still feel his hand in hers, cool and strong and startlingly gentle. She could still hear his voice saying, "You are magnificent," with such quiet conviction that it had made her believe it. The candles had burned to nothing, and Natalie was sitting in darkness when she heard footsteps on the stairs. She stood quickly, her heart hammering, and then light bloomed, and Quintus appeared carrying a lantern, his face unreadable. "What happened?" Natalie demanded. "It is done," he said, and set the lantern down. The council agreed, barely and with much argument, but they agreed. "I sent my best diplomat to the Dragomir with the offer an hour ago." And now we wait." He moved closer, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. The wedding was to be at midnight. If they accept the offer, the Dragomir will send word by sunset. If they refuse, they will come to the ceremony as planned, and I will have to decide what to do. "You'll refuse," Natalie said. "Right? You'll tell them no?" "If I refuse in front of both assembled courts, it will be seen as a declaration of war. The Dragomir will take it as the ultimate insult, and my own people will see it as a betrayal of my duty. Everything we have worked for, the fragile peace we have built, will shatter. But you'll be free." "I will be free, and my people will die," Quintus said, and there was anguish in his voice now. "That is the choice you are asking me to make, Natalie. My freedom or their lives." She stared at him, the weight of it crashing down on her. She had been so confident, so sure that there was another way, but she hadn't thought it through, hadn't considered what it would actually cost him to choose himself. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to make things worse." "You did not make things worse," Quintus said. He came to her and took her hands, both of them this time, and held them between his own. "You gave me hope. You showed me that there might be another path. And whatever happens tonight, I will be grateful for that." "I don't want you to be grateful," Natalie said fiercely. "I want you to be happy. I want you to have a choice." "Then pray the Dragomir have wisdom," Quintus said quietly. "Pray they see the value of peace over pride." They waited together as the afternoon faded into evening, sitting side by side on the stone tombs, not talking much, just existing in each other's presence. Natalie found herself memorizing the lines of his face, the way the lantern light caught in his white hair, the precise way he held himself even in stillness. If this went wrong, if he had to marry Elisabetta, she would likely never see him again. This strange pocket of time they had stolen would close, and they would both go back to their separate cages. The thought hurt more than it should have. "Doriti." "Natalie," Quintus said eventually, and there was something in his voice that made her look up sharply. "If the Dragomir refuse, if I must choose between duty and freedom, I need you to know that meeting you has changed something in me. You have reminded me what it means to want something for myself, and whatever I decide, I will carry that with me." "You're saying goodbye." "I'm saying that you matter," he said, "that this night has mattered, that you are not alone in your courage." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes and force them back. "You matter too. You're not just a king, you're a person. Don't forget that." "I will try not to." The lantern flickered and Quintus tensed, his head turning toward the stairs. "Someone is coming." A moment later, Natalie heard it too. Footsteps descending quickly, and then a figure appeared in the doorway, another vampire, this one female with dark hair and sharp features. She inclined her head to Quintus. "My lord, the Dragomir have sent their answer." "And?" "They accept. Lady Elisabetta herself brought the message. She says the offer is generous and she will present it to her family council within the hour. They request you attend the discussion to negotiate the specific terms." Natalie felt her knees go weak with relief. Quintus closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they were bright with something that might have been joy. "Tell them I will be there within the hour," he said, "and send word to our council that the wedding is postponed, pending the outcome of negotiations." The female vampire nodded and disappeared back up the stairs. Quintus turned to Natalie and caught her as she swayed, his hand steadying her. "It's working," she breathed. "They said yes." "They said they would negotiate," Quintus corrected, but he was almost smiling. It is not over yet, but it is a beginning. This is incredible. This is your doing. He cupped her face in his cool hands, his eyes intense on hers. You did this, Natalie. You saw what I could not see. I just said the obvious thing. Nothing about you is obvious, Quintus said, and then he was kissing her. It was soft at first, tentative, as though he was asking permission, and Natalie made a small sound and leaned into him, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. He tasted like cold water, and something darker, wilder, and when he deepened the kiss, she felt it down to her bones, a belonging she had never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard, and Quintus rested his forehead against hers. I have to go, he said roughly. I have to meet with the Dragomir. I know, but after. When this is done, when the negotiations are finished and the peace is sealed. May I see you again? Yes, Natalie said, and felt the word settle into her chest like a promise. Yes? Where will you go? Tonight while I am in negotiation. Where will you be safe? I don't know, Natalie admitted. I still don't have anywhere to go. Quintus pulled back and reached into his jacket, producing a key and a card. This is the key to my residence, a townhouse on Delancey Street. It is warded. No one can enter without permission, and I have human staff who will not ask questions. Go there, rest, be safe, and wait for me. Quintus? Please, he said, let me know you are somewhere safe while I do this. Let me have that. Natalie took the key and the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Okay, I'll wait for you. Good. He kissed her again, quick and fierce, and then stepped back. I will send someone to show you the way out. Do not let anyone see you in the wedding dress. Take the side exit through the gardens. Be careful, Natalie said. The Dragomir still hate you, even if they're negotiating. Be careful. I am always careful, Quintus said, and now I have something to be careful for. He left, moving up the stairs two at a time, and Natalie stood in the lamplight with her heart racing and her lips still tingling from his kiss, and tried to process what had just happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been standing at an altar, about to marry a man she didn't love. Now she was holding the key to a vampire king's townhouse, wearing a destroyed wedding dress, and waiting to find out if she had just helped prevent a supernatural war. Her life had officially become insane. But God help her, she didn't want to go back. The vampire who came to escort her out was young-looking, male, with pale hair and cautious eyes. He introduced himself as Stefan and handed her a long coat to cover the wedding dress, then led her through a maze of tunnels that apparently connected the cathedral crypt to a network of underground passages. Lord Quintus uses these for travel during the day, Stefan explained as they walked. The old city is riddled with them. You can get almost anywhere in Philadelphia without seeing the sun if you know the paths. They emerged in a garden 3 blocks from the cathedral, evening twilight soft around them, and Stefan pointed down the street. 4 blocks that way, then turn left on Delancey. The townhouse is number 43. The staff are expecting you. Thank you, Natalie said. Stefan nodded and melted back into the shadows, and Natalie pulled the coat tighter around herself and started walking. The townhouse was elegant in that understated old money way. Brick and wrought iron and shuttered windows, set back from the street behind a small garden. Natalie used the key Quintus had given her, and the door opened silently, revealing a foyer done in dark wood and soft lighting. A woman appeared immediately, middle-aged and efficient-looking, and smiled at her. Miss Hartwell? Lord Quintus called ahead. I'm Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper. Let me show you to your room. The room was on the 3rd floor. A guest suite with a 4-poster bed and a bathroom that had a tub the size of a small pool. Mrs. Chen produced clothes in Natalie's size jeans, a soft sweater, undergarments still in their packaging, and informed her that dinner would be ready within the hour if she was hungry. Natalie showered first, standing under water as hot as she could stand, and letting it wash away the grime and shock of the past 24 hours. She dried off and dressed in the clothes Mrs. Chen had provided, and it felt like putting on a new skin, shedding the bride she had been, and becoming someone else entirely. Someone who had kissed a vampire king in a crypt and liked it, someone who was waiting for him to come home. Dinner was soup and bread and felt like the best meal Natalie had ever eaten. Mrs. Chen didn't ask questions, just brought food and tea, and told her that Lord Quintus would likely be in negotiation until late. She shouldn't wait up. But Natalie couldn't sleep. She curled up in a chair by the window and watched the street below, her mind replaying the past day over and over. The wedding, the chapel, Quintus kneeling in the dark, his voice saying, "You are magnificent," his kiss. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to the sound of the front door opening and closing, and then footsteps on the stairs. She stood quickly, her heart hammering, and then Quintus was in the doorway. He looked exhausted, which she hadn't known was possible for vampires, but his eyes were bright, and when he saw her, he smiled. "It is done," he said. "The Dragomir have agreed. We have negotiated a peace treaty, a formal redistribution of territories, and a joint council structure. No marriage required." Natalie felt her knees go weak and sat down hard in the chair. It worked. It worked. Quintus came into the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "You saved me, Natalie. You showed me there was another way, and you were right." "I'm so glad," Natalie whispered. She reached out and touched his face, tracing the line of his cheekbone. "I'm so glad you're free. There is still much to do. The formal treaty must be drawn up and signed. The new council must be established, the territories properly surveyed and transferred. It will take weeks, perhaps months. But the foundation is laid. The war is over." "Then you did it. You ended a 300-year-old feud in one night." "We did it," Quintus corrected. He turned his head and kissed her palm, a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "I could not have done this without you." "What happens now?" Natalie asked. "What happens to us?" Quintus was quiet for a moment, his thumbs stroking across her knuckles. "That depends on what you want. You have your own life to rebuild, your own path to find." "I don't have a path," Natalie said. "I don't have anything. No home, no job, no family who will speak to me. I'm starting from zero." "Not zero," Quintus said gently. "You have courage. You have will. You have a mind that sees solutions where others see only walls. That is not nothing. But it's not a plan. Then let me offer you one." He shifted to sit beside her chair, still holding her hand. "Stay here, in this house. I have more space than I need and staff who will help you. Take some time to decide what you want to do, where you want to go. Let me help you, as you helped me." "Quintus, I can't just move in with you." "Why not?" "Because—" Natalie stopped, trying to articulate the tangle of reasons. "Because we barely know each other. Because this is too fast. Because you're a vampire king and I'm a human mess, and this is crazy." "It is crazy," Quintus agreed. "But so is hiding in a crypt together. So is solving a blood feud with negotiation theory. We seem to specialize in crazy, you and I. This is different. This is us. Whatever us means." "Then tell me what you want," Quintus said, turning to face her fully. "Not what you think you should want. Not what makes sense. What do you actually want, Natalie Hartwell?" She looked at him in the soft lamplight, this impossible, beautiful man who had given her sanctuary and listened to her like she mattered and kissed her like she was precious. She thought about walking away, going back to the human world, finding some apartment and some job and some semblance of normalcy. And she knew with absolute certainty that she didn't want it. "I want to stay," she whispered. "I want to know you. I want to see where this goes. But Quintus, I'm human. You're immortal. How is this supposed to work?" "I do not know," Quintus said honestly, "but I know that I have not felt this alive in centuries. I know that when I am with you, time means something again, and I know that I would like to try." "Try what?" "Us," he said simply. "Whatever that becomes." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, and this time she let them fall. "I ran away from my wedding because I didn't want to be trapped, and now here I am, thinking about starting something with someone who makes me feel more trapped in the best way, like I never want to leave." "That is not trapped," Quintus said softly. "That is choosing to stay. That is choosing each other." "Is it? Are you choosing me?" "Yes." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense on hers. "I am choosing you, Natalie, for however long you will have me, for whatever shape this takes. I am choosing you." "I choose you too," she whispered, and then they were kissing again, deeper this time, more certain. She slid out of the chair and into his lap, and he held her like she was something infinitely fragile and infinitely strong all at once. When they finally broke apart, Quintus rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said quietly. "Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to be here. With me." "I want to be here," Natalie said. "I want to be with you. I don't know what that means or how it works, but I want to try. Then we will figure it out together." They sat there for a long time, wrapped around each other in the lamplight, and Natalie felt something settle in her chest that she had never felt before. Peace, belonging, home. She had run from her wedding and found something infinitely better. She had found choice. She had found herself. She had found him. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful and occasionally terrifying. Natalie stayed in the townhouse and slowly built herself a life. She found a part-time job at an art gallery, using her degree for the first time in years. She opened her own bank account. She got a phone that her parents didn't pay for and didn't have access to. Her family tried to contact her at first. Her mother called 14 times in the first week, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Her father sent lawyers with letters threatening to cut her off, then offering money if she would just come home. Marcus's lawyer sent a demand for the return of the engagement ring, which Natalie sent back with a note that said simply, "Keep it." By the third week, the calls had stopped, and Natalie knew she had truly burned those bridges. It hurt, but it also felt like freedom. Quintus was busy with the peace treaty, spending long hours in negotiation with the Dragomir representatives and his own council, but he always came home. They would sit up late talking, or he would take her on walks through the city at night, showing her the hidden places only vampires knew. He introduced her to Stefan and other members of his court, and they treated her with wary respect that slowly warmed into genuine friendliness. She learned the rhythms of vampire society, the protocols and politics, the blood laws and ancient feuds. She learned that Quintus was respected, even loved by his people, that his 500 years of rule had been marked by fairness and wisdom. And she learned that she was falling in love with him. It was there in the way he listened when she talked, giving her his complete attention as though she was the only person in the world. It was there in the way he touched her, always careful, always asking permission. It was there in the small ways he took care of her, making sure she ate and slept, bringing her books he thought she would like, leaving notes when he had to be gone during the day. It was there in the way he looked at her, like she was something miraculous. 2 months after the night in the crypt, Quintus took her to the formal signing of the peace treaty. It was held in a vast underground hall beneath the city, and Natalie stood beside him as hundreds of vampires from both courts gathered to witness the end of the war. Elisabetta Dragomir was there, a striking woman with dark hair and eyes that held old pain, and she approached Quintus before the ceremony began. "Lord Quintus," she said, and her voice was cool but not hostile, "I wish to thank you for finding another way. The marriage would have been a horror for us both." "Lady Elisabetta," Quintus said, inclining his head, "I am glad we could find a path to peace that did not require such sacrifice." Elisabetta's eyes flicked to Natalie, standing at Quintus's side in a dark green dress that made her feel like she belonged. "And this is the human who convinced you to negotiate?" "This is Natalie," Quintus said, and there was such warmth in his voice that Natalie felt her chest tighten. "She is the reason we are all here tonight." "Then I owe you a debt as well," Elisabetta said to Natalie. "You freed me from a future I dreaded. Thank you." "You're welcome," Natalie said. "I hope the peace holds." "It will," Elisabetta said. "I will make certain of it." The signing was formal and ancient, done with ceremony and witnessed by the elders of both courts. Quintus and Elisabetta's father signed the treaty side by side, their signatures binding their people to peace, and when it was done, a cheer went up that shook the stone walls. Afterward, there was a reception, vampires from both courts mingling with cautious curiosity, and Quintus kept Natalie at his side the whole time, his hand warm at the small of her back. "You did well," he told her as they finally escaped to a quieter corner. "My people adore you already." "I didn't do anything." "You stood beside me," Quintus said. "You showed them that I have chosen a partner, and that she is strong and clever and unafraid. That matters more than you know." "Partner?" Natalie repeated softly. "Is that what I am?" You are whatever you wish to be, Quintus said, but I hope you know that I love you. The words hung in the air between them, and Natalie felt her breath catch. You love me. I love you, Quintus said simply. I have loved you since that first night in the chapel when you ran from your fate and collided with mine. I love your courage and your fire and the way you see solutions where others see only obstacles. I love the way you make me feel young again, the way you remind me what it means to want things. I love you, Natalie, with everything I am. I love you too, Natalie whispered, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. I love you so much it terrifies me. Why terrifying? Because you're immortal and I'm not. Because someday I'm going to get old and die, and you'll still be here, still young, still beautiful. Because I don't know how to build a forever with someone who actually has forever. Quintus cupped her face in his hands, his eyes serious. Do you trust me? Yes. Then trust me when I say that we will find a way. There are options, choices we can make when you are ready. But for now, can we simply love each other? Can we have this time without fear? Yes, Natalie said and leaned into him. Yes. They stayed at the reception for another hour, and then Quintus took her home, and they spent the night wrapped around each other, talking and touching and being together in the quiet sanctuary of his house. The next morning, Natalie woke to find Quintus still awake, sitting by the window and watching the sun rise with an expression of profound longing. You miss it, she said softly. The daylight. Every day of my existence, Quintus said without turning. It is the price of this life, power and immortality in exchange for never feeling the sun on my skin again. Natalie got up and went to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. What if there was a way? What if you could walk in daylight? There is no way. It is the fundamental law of our nature. But you have magic. I've seen vampires do impossible things. There must be research, someone who's tried to find a solution. There have been attempts, Quintus said, spells and rituals and bargains. Most end in death. The few that succeed grant only moments, minutes at most, before the burning begins. But someone must be working on it. Someone must still be trying. Quintus turned to look at her, something shifting in his expression. Why does this matter to you? Because it matters to you, Natalie said. Because I love you and I want you to have everything you want. And because if I'm going to be part of your world, I want to help make it better. You are extraordinary, Quintus said softly. Do you know that? You've mentioned it. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and when they broke apart, he said, There's a scholar in Vienna, very old, very reclusive. She has been researching daylight tolerance for centuries. I could send word, ask if she has made progress. Do it, Natalie said. Let's find out. Quintus sent the letter that afternoon, and they settled into waiting. In the meantime, Natalie's life continued to take shape. She got promoted at the gallery and started curating her own exhibitions. She made friends with Stefan and some of the other younger vampires who frequented the townhouse. She learned to navigate vampire politics and society, becoming a familiar face in Quintus's world, and she fell more in love with him every single day. They went to museums at night, walking hand in hand through empty galleries. They attended vampire court functions together, and Natalie learned to dance the old-fashioned way, letting Quintus lead her through waltzes that were ancient when she was born. They spent quiet evenings in the library, reading side by side, and Quintus introduced her to books that had been written before printing presses existed. He showed her his world with the patience of someone who had all the time in existence, and she showed him hers with the urgency of someone who knew how precious each moment was. 5 months after the night in the chapel, the letter from Vienna arrived. The scholar's name was Dr. Katharina Voss, and she had indeed made progress. She had developed a ritual that could grant extended daylight tolerance, not permanent, but lasting several hours at a time. She was willing to share her research in exchange for Quintus's patronage and protection, as her work had made her enemies among the more conservative vampire factions. Quintus read the letter 3 times, then looked at Natalie with something like awe. She has done it. Not a cure, but better than anything I have seen in 800 years. So you can walk in daylight? For a few hours, with preparation and the right ritual. It is not the same as being human, but it is more than I have had in centuries. Then let's do it, Natalie said. Let's bring her here, set her up with whatever she needs, make it happen. They brought Dr. Voss to Philadelphia 3 weeks later. She was a severe woman, centuries old and utterly dedicated to her research, and she set up a laboratory in the townhouse's basement with Quintus's full support. Within a month, she had performed the ritual on Quintus, a complex working involving blood magic and very old spells. And then came the test. They waited until dawn. Natalie stood beside Quintus in the garden behind the townhouse as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and she held her breath as the first rays touched his skin. He didn't burn. Quintus stood frozen for a moment, staring at his hands as sunlight washed over them, and then he looked up at the sky and Natalie saw tears streaming down his face. "I feel it," he whispered. "I feel the sun." Natalie wrapped her arms around him and held him as he shook with silent sobs, 800 years of grief and loss pouring out of him. They stood there for an hour, Quintus drinking in the daylight like he had been drowning, and when he finally pulled back he was transformed, his face alight with joy. "Thank you," he said to Natalie. "Thank you for thinking this was possible, for pushing me to try. I just wanted you to be happy." "I am happy," Quintus said. "I am happier than I have been in longer than I can remember." They spent the day together in the sunlight, walking through the city during daylight hours for the first time, and Quintus looked at everything with wonder, as though seeing the world anew. That evening, as the sun set and they returned to the townhouse, Quintus took her hands. "Natalie," he said, "we need to talk about the future, about your future." "Okay. You are human," he said. "You will age, and I will not. We have perhaps 50 years if we are fortunate, and then you will be gone and I will remain, unless you choose something different." Natalie felt her heart begin to hammer. "You mean turning, becoming a vampire? Yes, it is your choice and yours alone. But I need you to know that if you wish it, I would turn you myself. I would give you immortality, and we would have forever instead of decades. And if I don't want that, if I want to stay human, then I will love you for however long you have," Quintus said simply. "And when you are gone, I will carry you with me always. But you should decide consciously, deliberately, not let time make the decision for you." Natalie looked at him, this man she loved, this vampire king who had given her sanctuary and choice and love, and felt the weight of the decision settle over her. Immortality, forever. It was a gift and a curse all at once, the promise of endless time with him balanced against losing her humanity, her mortality, her place in the daylight. Except now he could walk in daylight too, for a few hours at least. Except now she had seen that the impossible could be made possible. Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need," Quintus said. "This is not a decision to be made lightly, and whatever you choose, I will be here." Natalie thought about it for months. She talked to other vampires, asking about the turning process, about what it felt like to be immortal. She talked to Dr. Voss about the biology of it, the changes that happened. She talked to Mrs. Chen, who had known she was working for a vampire all along and who offered the perspective of someone who had chosen to remain human. And she talked to Quintus, long conversations about what forever actually meant, about the weight of centuries, about whether love could survive that kind of time. In the end, the decision came down to something simple. She wanted to stay with him. She wanted to build a life that lasted longer than a handful of decades. She wanted to see what they could become with time on their side, instead of ticking away. She told him 1 year after the night they met on the anniversary of the day she had run into that chapel and found him kneeling in the dark. "I want you to turn me," she said. "I want forever with you." Quintus cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "Are you certain? There is no going back." "I'm certain. I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." "Then I will give you this gift," Quintus said softly, "and I will spend eternity proving myself worthy of your choice." The turning was not easy. "Doctor?" Voss helped, monitoring the process to make sure Natalie's body took the change properly, and Quintus stayed with her through all of it, holding her through the pain and the fever and the strange dreams that came with dying and being reborn. When she woke 3 days later, the world was different. Colors were sharper, sounds were clearer, and she could hear Quintus's breathing from across the room like he was standing next to her. She was vampire. Quintus taught her control, how to manage the hunger and the strength and the strange new senses. Dr. Voss helped her through the daylight ritual so she too could walk in the sun for a few hours each day. Stefan and the others welcomed her fully into the court, and Natalie found herself settling into this new existence with surprising ease. She was faster now, stronger, and she would never grow old. She would have time to learn everything she wanted to learn, see everything she wanted to see, and she would have Quintus beside her for all of it. 6 months after her turning, Quintus took her back to the cathedral where they had met. They went at night, slipping through the side entrance into the old chapel, and stood together in the place where their story had begun. "I came here that night looking for peace," Quintus said quietly, "looking for a way to accept my fate, and instead I found you." "I came here running from my fate," Natalie said, "and I found you." "We found each other," Quintus corrected. He took her hands and knelt before her, there in the chapel, exactly as she had first seen him. "Natalie Hartwell, once human and now vampire, my partner and my love. I have no ring and no church blessing, but I offer you a vow nonetheless. I will stand beside you for as long as time allows. I will honor your choices and celebrate your victories and hold you through your sorrows. I will love you with everything I am for all the centuries we are given. This I swear." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, and she pulled him to his feet and held his face in her hands. "Quintus Falkenrath, vampire king and the man I love, I vow to stand beside you in return, to be your partner and your equal, to challenge you when you need it and support you always, to love you with my whole heart, for however long forever turns out to be. This I swear." They kissed there in the chapel, sealing their vows in the place where they had begun, and Natalie felt something settle deep in her bones. This was home. This was family. This was the life she had chosen and the love she had fought for. They left the cathedral hand in hand and walked out into the night together, and the city spread before them full of possibility and promise. Years passed, then decades. Quintus's court flourished under his continued rule, and Natalie became a respected figure in her own right, known for her diplomatic skills and her ability to see solutions others missed. The peace with the Dragomir held and deepened, and gradually the old wounds of the feud healed over into history. Dr. Voss perfected her daylight ritual, extending the protection to last most of the day, and vampires across the world began to emerge from their shadows, no longer bound entirely to darkness. Quintus and Natalie traveled, seeing the world together in a way that Quintus hadn't done in centuries. They walked through Rome and Tokyo and Mumbai, through rainforests and deserts and frozen tundra, and everywhere they went, they were together. They bought a house in the mountains of Colorado, a retreat where they could escape when the politics of court grew too heavy. They filled it with books and art and comfortable furniture, and they spent long stretches there just being together, talking and reading and existing in each other's presence. They learned each other through decades instead of months, and their love deepened into something that felt as essential as breathing. Sometimes, late at night when they were alone, Natalie would think about the girl she had been on that wedding day, the frightened, trapped girl who had run from her fate in a cloud of white silk. She felt impossibly distant now, like a character from a story rather than Natalie's own past. That girl had been brave enough to run, and in running, she had found everything she didn't know she was looking for. "Do you ever regret it?" Quintus asked her once, decades after her turning, "giving up your humanity, giving up the life you could have had?" "Never," Natalie said, and meant it with her whole heart. "This life, this existence with you, is better than anything I could have imagined. You gave me choice, and I chose this. I would choose it again every time." "I love you," Quintus said, as he had said 1,000 times before, and would say 1,000 times again. "I love you too," Natalie said. And in the quiet of their mountain house, with centuries stretching before them, they held each other close and knew that they had found what people searched lifetimes for. They had found home. They had found choice. They had found love, and they had forever to celebrate it.